Hi, I'm Dr. Crystal Collier, and here's what you need to know about driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. After the states adopted the federal drinking age of 21 in 1988, alcohol related driving fatalities significantly dropped. But why was there such a big drop in alcohol related deaths when the law just affected underage drinkers? You guessed it. It's all about the brain's development. Turns out that our adult brain, the frontal lobe, grows quite a bit between the ages of 18 and 21. At 16, when we start driving, we only have about 45% of our adult brain. But by age 20, our frontal lobe is about 80% online. This makes sense on 2 points. 1. The frontal lobe is not fully formed yet. That's where our executive functioning skills are, so we might make some poor decisions like underage alcohol use or drinking and driving. 2. Alcohol shuts off the frontal lobe, the part of the brain that makes good decisions and controls our impulses, and that is impaired when alcohol is added. Which unfortunately helps explain why alcohol is a factor in all 3 of the leading causes of death for 15 to 24-year-olds. Drunk driving is the number 1 cause of teenage deaths, and unfortunately every 50 minutes someone dies in a drunk driving crash, and 1 out of 4 of those crashes involves a teen driver. So let's do a deep dive to figure out what's going on. After drinking 2 beers, a driver will experience a reduction in their ability to see and do 2 things at the same time. As the frontal lobe shuts down, they lose judgment and experience changes in their mood. Whew, there's a lot going on there. But just adding 1 or 2 more drinks makes coordination and tracking much harder as the driver's response time slows down, to the point that they can't concentrate or see things accurately, resulting in a loss of control. Okay, we can all agree that drinking and driving is a terrible idea, but what about driving under the influence of a drug? Just like alcohol, marijuana is a central nervous system depressant, which means it too slows down a driver's reaction time, impairs their judgment, distorts their perception, and causes problem-solving difficulty. Methamphetamines and cocaine are central nervous system stimulants that increase a driver's recklessness, reduces their decision-making ability, and makes impulsive, aggressive driving much more likely. Even though doctors may prescribe opioids and sedatives, which may lead people to think that they're safe to drive on, remember, these cause dizziness, sleepiness, blurred vision, and impaired thinking, as well as memory. You'd think that knowing not to drive drugged is common knowledge, but here's what happens. When people think that a drug is harmless, they use it more. Check it out. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, when new research was published and public announcement campaigns were all over the TV about the harms of drugs like marijuana, people used it less because they were more aware of the dangers. But when industries who sell drugs advertise how safe it is, even if it's not, well, use, unfortunately, goes back up as the perception of harm or risk goes down. But is advertising so powerful that it could get you to do something that's harmful? This study illustrates just how powerful social influence can be. Researchers looked at brain activation while participants looked at a picture of young people drinking and driving. At first, the picture only had a few likes. Not much is going on as they made comments about the behavior being not a good thing to do. It's literally a no-brainer. No frontal lobe needed to decide drinking and driving is bad, which might be why there's not a lot of activity in their frontal lobes. But look what happens when the researchers increased how many likes the picture received. Brain activity went up all over including in the frontal lobe, where judgment happens. Now, young people said things like, well, maybe it's not such a bad thing to do after all, especially if more people like it. But could social or peer influence be powerful enough to get you to ride in a car with somebody who's been drinking or using drugs? What would you do? You need the person driving to have their frontal lobe on, like the brain scans at the top, so that you get where you need to go safely. Saying something, though, can be really difficult, especially if it's an adult whose frontal lobe is off because they're under the influence. So practice speaking up. Know how to get an alternative ride so that you can stay safe. Okay, now that you know your neuro, build your ego strength and say something. Practice your scripts ahead of time. Because, dude, it is not cool to drive under the influence of alcohol or drugs.